I'm Paul Gunsky with Cinelux Theaters based in Northern California and also an iTalk board member. We're closing out today's session with something special, a live edition of the Ticket to Ride podcast right here at iTalk Connect. If you haven't yet had a chance to tune in, you need to. It's always a great listen with 3 industry insiders with a candid perspective on the business of movies. It's available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and probably everything in between. Today's discussion and live broadcast will focus on the strength and the future of Main Street cinemas as independent exhibitors work together to shape our industry and our industry's direction. Leading this conversation are Ticket to Ride hosts Paul Dergarabedian of ComScore, Mike Polydoros of Paper Airplane, and Thaddeus Bouchard of Screen Dollars. Also joining later will be our president and CEO, who is laser focused on the independent theaters, Mr. Michael O'Leary, and our very, very dedicated and laser focused iTalk chairperson, Colleen Barstow. This discussion is about advocating for the fair distribution policies to fostering exhibitor studio partnerships. This discussion is about action, innovation, and new opportunities for our industry. Let's welcome our panel and get this started. Thank you.
By the way, thank you, Paul. You got my name right.
Thank you, Paul. Thank
you said my last name perfectly.
Thank you so much.
So this is Ticket to Ride. Oh, where's the slide?
We got to put the slides
Ticket to
up.
Ride.
We got to have the slides, Paul. There we go. I got the slides.
That was my
there
first mistake. So I'm Paul Dergarabedian, Senior Media Analyst for ComScore. Mike Polydoros, Paper Airplane Media. Thaddeus Bouchard of Screen Dollars. And this is Season 2, Episode 8 of our Ticket to Ride podcast. Imagine now in your mind the Ticket to Ride, you know, the guitar part that kicks off.
Yes, that's the
Beatles
fun
song.
part.
We won't copyright infringe by actually playing the whole song here. So we're going to do a quick presentation of data.
Let's do it this way. So for anybody who listens to the podcast, you know, we usually kick it off with kind of a recap of where we are from a box office standpoint. Yeah. So what we wanted to do today is give you guys kind of an overview of, not that you need to know, but where we are, but more importantly, where we're going, because it's all about looking forward.
That's right.
So the first thing we should do is let's look at the box office year to date, Paul. What do you have for us?
Well, $1.363 billion so far this year. That's through the 27th. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at that percentage of box office from the top movie, which is so far Captain America: Brave New World. But you know, it's been an interesting year. It's been a bit of an up and down roller coaster, and we've always talked about this on the podcast, that everyone in this room or anyone who's been in this business more than 5 minutes knows that it's an incredibly tough business to gauge, because you cannot take a sliver of time and make a big pronouncement, good or bad necessarily, but usually it's a bad thing when people look at the box office going down for over a few weeks and think, oh, it's game over. It's not, because we saw that last year, right, Mike? Before Inside Out 2 opened, we were down big last year.
Anyone who has listened to us has heard this over and over again, and that is going into the middle of June, into the weekend before Inside Out, we were down about 26% from the previous year. The sky was falling. Everybody was looking at the summer coming up going, how will we ever compete with the Barbenheimer? How will we get $1 billion out of a couple of films? Well, then Inside Out showed up, and it was, what, $64 million?
Actually $1.7 billion worldwide on that movie. What happened was, the reason I bring this up is because last year at this point, through the 27th, we were at $1.5 billion. We're down about it says 9.2% higher than 25. Really, we're down 9.2%. Well, probably after this weekend down a little bit more, but don't get sad about that, because I think Minecraft is going to overperform. But again, like Mike said, you know, we were down actually, I think it was over that. It was almost 30% we were down before Inside Out 2 opened. By the end of the year, we finished. Now, we were still down from the previous year, but remember the strikes and all that impacted the release calendar. But we wound up down just 3%, so we knocked 24 points off that deficit.
So the one thing I want to bring up too, and you know, as a lot of you know, I worked at Lionsgate for a short time, just 23 years. One of the things we would always look at from a studio standpoint was a portfolio approach. In other words, you don't get too high on one movie, don't get too low on another movie. Wait till the 52 weeks are done, and then let's see where we net out. And we're early in the game here, guys. And I think the tendency, especially, I think this came up earlier, we were talking, in one of the panels, where the press likes to jump on either the highs are highs or the lows are lows. It's never like the business is what the business is. And it's a very secular business to start with. So I think it's important to remember that we're very, and we can go back to the slides for a second, because I think we've got something that will kind of point this out.
So that was last
Last year, how it all ended up, and we talked about where we were and where we ended up. But since January 1st, we've released about 25% of the schedule. So let's look at this in as a sports schedule. Yes,
that's right.
From Boston, a big sports town. We are 25% into the schedule. We're a quarter of the way in. We haven't even gotten to the games yet where our big heavy hitters are coming up to the plate. And yet we're all writing off the season before we've even started. A little premature in my mind.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
I think you have to look back to how we were all feeling 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. We were on a sugar high, right? We were all feeling really good about the box office at that point. And then people would start getting towards the end of the year to talk about, well, what's coming in 2025, what's coming in 2026. And there was tremendous optimism about what was ahead in 2025 and 2026. As you dial it in a little bit more closely, Q1's a little soft, obviously, and it's played out to be a little soft. But if you look over the course of 24 months, all of 25 and 26, there's tremendous film content which is coming. So the box office is inevitably going to ride that roller coaster, right?
Absolutely.
Well, and the thing is, I remember coming out of CinemaCon last year, and I was sitting after one of the presentations, I was standing with a couple of exhibitors, and we were all raising our estimates because we had just seen footage, I think it was out of the Disney presentation, and everybody was looking at, wow, Planet of the Apes looks great. Inside Out looks fantastic. All of those movies, Mufasa, that overperformed at the end of the day. And I'm looking forward, we haven't even seen the first studio presentation yet. I am so looking forward to seeing, what is in store for us this week.
Well, and we could, on the next slide, we'll see what's coming out, and it's an incredible slate. I have to tell you, though, I'm a big car guy, and so Formula One, the Warner Brothers movie, June 20th, I'm all about that, and so I'm looking forward to that. But these are not all the titles. There's a lot of other big titles to come. We couldn't fit them all on one slide, but there are so many great movies on the way, and it's not just about this year. Next year, look at the movies that are on tap. We're going to have another Avengers movie, Avengers Doomsday, to kick off the summer next year. Toy Story 5. I mean, there's some big movies, but there's also movies that are great for independent theater owners. There's so many cool movies on the way, and I really think it's also about not only independent theaters, but independent films as well.
It's a volume of movies. It's not just the top movies.
That's
well,
right.
I think that's a really good point, because when you talk about the independent film sector, last year, our friends at Neon really stepped up. In addition to Anora, this year they had The Monkey. Last year they had Long Legs.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's been missing a little bit, is that mid-level movie that's really been taking off. And, we're seeing signs of all of that kind of finding its way.
And you just sparked something in me to think about. A Complete Unknown, A Real Pain, Nosferatu. Those are really amazing films. And I always say, don't conflate. Now, those did well. Nosferatu did huge business. Complete Unknown did very, very well. But I do the box office all the time. I talk to the press all the time about it. And I never want to conflate a movie's box office performance with its quality. There could be a burger chain, I won't name it, that sells millions of hamburgers. Sure. That doesn't mean they make the best hamburger.
You sure?
Well, no, I'm not going to name it.
Okay.
But I do love In-N-Out Burger.
Just ask the Oscar winners, right?
That's a good one. Yeah, just like the Oscar
quality of
winner.
films doesn't necessarily equate to box office.
And Anora got a box office bump. When it won Best Picture, it had earned about $15 million domestic. It was available at home that week. It did another $5 million in your theaters after that win, for a total of $20 million, which I know it's not like an Avatar gross, but it's still a really important movie. And Sean Baker, the director of Anora, what he said at the Oscars, I'm sure you all saw it, we should just have it up here all the time, what he was saying about the movie theater experience. And, filmmakers are, the previous panels were great, and they really, I think, keyed onto something really cool, like how you have filmmakers come to your movie theater, you have special guests come in, you can get actors in movies to come to your theater. That's really huge, and filmmakers are the greatest, you're all the greatest ambassadors for the movie theater experience, but to have a film director like Sean Baker and Christopher Nolan, and there's so many great filmmakers, Denis Villeneuve, who love the movie theater experience, and they're fighting for that, for sure. Can I get an amen? No.
So now we're going to go back one. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the moral of the story is it's way too early to draw any conclusions on 2025. I think we're all excited to see what's coming out here this week. I think, the tendency is, oh my goodness, we've had all these gloomy weeks. Somebody made the, earlier, I did my own little projections earlier in December, and as you look at the numbers, we're pretty much right on where, we thought we would be at this point, which, okay, it's not great, but, as I said, 75% of the schedule left to be played.
And the portfolio approach that you were talking about is really key, because so much can happen between now and the end of the year. Look at last year when you had Wicked and Gladiator 2. That led into Moana 2 on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And we had that rally at the end that got us to $8.745 billion.
I think we've done enough on kind of talking about that.
We have guests.
I think it would be great. Why don't we bring up our guests?
Yes.
We'd like to bring up the president and CEO of Cinema United, Mr. Michael O'Leary. And then Colleen
Barstow. And we need chairs. Oh,
we need chairs. Look at that. Look at that.
It's the stage crew here.
Yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
I think we'll put our guests
In the middle.
In the middle.
Yes, absolutely.
This is live, by the way.
So sit in one of the two middle seats.
Yeah.
All right, welcome to Ticket to Ride Live.
Hello, Mr. O'Leary.
Great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Mr. O'Leary.
So we have questions. Yes. We just wanted to stand for a while, and then we thought we'd take a seat.
So, Mr. O'Leary, this is now your third CinemaCon. What's your take on the industry and where we are right now?
Well, look, I think everybody in this room knows we've had some challenges. I think we're headed in the right direction. I think we have a clear sense of what we're trying to achieve. There's some difficult issues out there, and I'm going to talk about those tomorrow in my speech. But I feel like the future's bright, but we've got to solve some tough problems. But this is an industry that's done that historically, and I have no doubt that it'll do it again. Part of what I'm going to try to do tomorrow is elevate those issues. There's a lot of things out there that we all kind of grumble about or we're not happy about, and we got to start to talk about them. People need to understand this industry, the challenges people face. I think there's just a general lack of understanding how this industry works. And so I feel very good about it. I'd say on a personal level, last year I was more nervous than excited. This year I'm more excited than nervous. And I think that's the logical, healthy progression. So I'm going to take the win and keep moving forward.
I love it.
Can we talk about the name change?
Sure.
So what's unique about the name itself, and why now? And is there a new focus for the association? And we have the logo right here.
Yes, love that.
I love it too.
Well, part of the reason we did the name change is because we need to do as an industry a better job of branding and promoting ourselves. And so you would come to these conferences and it'd be, 5 brilliant people sitting in front of a black wall, right? And then you could use the picture and no one knew where we were. They didn't know what we were talking about. So that's a little thing that is important in terms of the rebranding. There was nothing magical about the time other than the fact that last year when we were here, we were in a board meeting. Because I run a very efficient meeting, we were ahead of schedule. And we were waiting for Mitch to come in and talk. Mitch was also on time, but we had a weird gap of time. And one of our board members said, hey, why don't you change the name? And everybody kind of said, hey, why don't we change the name? And so that was it. I'd love to tell you there was some big strategic conversation, and we put a lot of time and energy into it. I do think, NATO is a name that's iconic in many ways. It is complicated. We would get the other NATO's mail. We would get their phone calls.
I was wondering about that.
I will say the mail is the hinky part. Boxes, and they're duct taped, and it's just not.
That's not cool.
Did you get invited into any social media chats that you shouldn't have been in or something?
I think NATO has an important role, and God bless them, but I don't want their mail. So
No.
every now and then somebody knock on the door. But really what we were trying to do with the name change was say, look, how do we want to approach the future? We wanted something fresh, something that was modern. Our entire approach to everything is to put the experience and the exhibitors at the forefront. So we wanted a title which kind of conveyed the togetherness we have in terms of promoting going to the movies. The logo is a movie screen. We want people to look at the name and the logo and think about going to the movies, not think about the trade association, because no one gets excited about a trade association.
Right, and acronyms can be tough sometimes.
We tried to avoid an acronym, so please don't say CU.
And it's, I think, so cool to have Colleen on the panel. because you really represent so much of what makes going to the movies great, and everyone in this room. And I'm a guy who grew up going to local movie theaters and all that, so thank you also for being here. This is really cool.
Yes, I'm excited to be here.
So Colleen, as the owner of ACX Theaters, but prior to that it was Main Street Cinemas, and I love the story of how you guys came up with the name. Can you let everybody know?
Yes, so we came to Nebraska due to my husband being in the Air Force, and we bought a house in the little town of Plattsmouth, Nebraska. And we were kind of deciding, do we stay in, do we get out? We had young children at the time, and there was a lot of remotes going on. And Bill came one day and said, let's buy the theater. And it was like, where is the theater? I don't even know where it's at. And it was right off their Main Street. Another gentleman who owned it, he got orders, he was leaving. We went in to sign the paperwork, and at the last minute, he's like, we need a down payment. And it was like, okay, well, what do you think? He's like, I need $1,200. And we kind of looked at each other, and, military doesn't pay very well. And it was like, okay, we'll be right back. And we ran to the bank and actually took advances out on 3 different credit cards to get up to the $1,200. We gave it to him, and that's how this all began.
And how long ago was that?
33 years ago, 1988, bought our first circuit was a lot of one-screen theaters. I think that's why I love representing all of you in this room, because we've seen the lowest of lows when you only have one screen. Our circuit is now, we have 7 locations, 54 screens, but knowing what we did back then has never left. So I understand the issues, big or small, we all share in those issues.
So follow-up question to that, and that is, what do you find to be your biggest strengths as an independent and your biggest challenges?
I think our biggest strength is we all work and play in the communities where we have our theaters. So we know the communities. We know what will work, what will not work. You can submerge yourself in with the local schools, with just different groups. And so I think the strength of being an independent is you have that immediate personal connection. I think one of the hard things is, back in the day, getting prints was really difficult for independents. Sometimes you had to play the B picture to maybe get their next A picture. So
they wouldn't do that.
And I think it's just, the hard part is the inconsistency of not knowing, possibly the Monday before that Friday, what are you going to be able to play? So I think that was the hardest, is just the inconsistency of not knowing.
Is that inconsistency still there today?
Not as much, no. There's a lot of independents in this room who still do not know what they're going to be able to play until the Monday before. And when you deal with that, you don't have time to go out and market a movie.
I was going to say, so that the real issue there is you don't get to market to your community at that point.
Correct, because you have to wait for that Monday, yes, you're able to play it. So.
I think it's fascinating to hear your stories and how you developed your theater and what your challenges are. And then, Michael, when you're in a room of the independent theater owners, how do you, I'm sure you love to hear what they have to say and how they do their business. How do you wear the 2 hats of learning about independent theaters and then also the bigger theaters? You're kind of over all the, this association works with all the theaters, big and small.
I think that's one of the most rewarding parts of the job, is interacting with people, traveling around, seeing what they do. Everybody cares so much about their theater and their community, and it's very energizing. I've never finished one of those trips and gotten on the plane to fly home and not felt more excited about my job. In fact, sometimes when I'm kind of hit a lull, I'll schedule a trip just because I know that interaction will be exciting and exhilarating for me. So there are different pushes and pulls that happen depending on the size of your circuit, and I've tried to learn as much as I can about all of them. I don't think our fundamental purpose is to represent this industry, and this was a theory that I applied when I worked for the studios. You can't represent somebody until you know how they do things, until you know kind of generally how they're thinking. Yeah. When I started working for the studios, I spent a lot of time trying to understand the business side of it, which is, you guys know, is not the fun, sexy part of it. It's the adding and subtracting part of it. But I had to understand what motivated those folks. And it's the same thing if you're representing theater owners, if you're representing car dealers. It doesn't matter. If we don't understand what's important to you and how you think about things, there's a ceiling to how effective we can be as your advocates. So highest priority, we take the whole team out, and we do twice a year, we go somewhere somewhere and we have like a little strategic retreat, but we do it somewhere where we can go and meet with a theater owner and get a deeper dive and understand what they do. It's not just important for me to understand it. I want everybody in the organization to have a deeper understanding of what the people we represent are going through every day.
How long have you been in the position now? A year and a half? Is that about right?
So it'll be 2 years in I think May 2nd.
And what do you do now that is different than what you did a year ago? Like, how has your job evolved in the last 2 years?
Well, I think it's all part of a process, right? When you come in, you have to kind of figure out what's going on. And you spend a lot of time trying to understand what's important. A big part of what I've done over the last 2 years is work with the team and kind of, we have a relatively small group of people relative to other trade associations. We don't have a ton of resources, so we have to maximize everything. I always say there's no single-use plastic at Cinema United because we have to, everything we do it, we think, well, this would be great for CinemaCon, but how can we use it for other things? Like that big white Cinema United sign you saw out there, we bought that. We think it's great, but we have to figure out other ways to use it. Paul's going to keep it at his house.
It's going to appear on social media all around the country.
I like it, Paul. We'll put it in the room. That Room Raider 10 you have, we'll make it an 11 with Cinema United behind it.
I'll do that. No, I actually do want that. But remember, I know that there's Spinal Tap 2 coming up. So I was just thinking, remember in the movie where they had the Stonehenge?
Yeah.
And it was really tiny? Well, we could just need smaller ones of that sign, and we can do that.
Well, we'll make smaller ones and sell them online.
I like it.
Yeah. But I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to set a clear direction as how we operate, make sure everybody in the organization understands their role, and then I believe in empowering people, and letting them do their thing. Like if you take Erin, for example, everybody in this room probably knows Erin. She does Erin, yep, there you go. There you go. Here. She does an enormous job with membership. And, she has tremendous freedom to do different things. And she uses her judgment to say, hey, I need to check with Michael, or hey, I should run this by him. But for the most part, you tell me, I think the results have been very positive. So we try to replicate that across the organization. What that allows me to do is focus on kind of the bigger picture, longer term stuff. I spend a lot of time on the phone, whether it's talking with our members or talking with folks in the studios. I also, because I've been around for a while, I have a network of people that are outside the industry, but, being in Washington, I can call and talk to them, and they are hearing things too. I'm fortunate that I'm at a place where I'll have friends that are in an office on the Hill talking about healthcare, and they'll say, hey, while we were in there, we ran into so-and-so, and he said this about open captioning or whatever it is. And so it's just a lot of kind of managing those things, but that variation is what makes it such a great job. So there's really not a standard day, but they're all kind of different variations on the same theme.
It's an interesting thing, the geography of the industry, right? Because the organization's based in Washington, D.C., doing God's work in Washington, D.C., right?
I don't know how much of God's work is going on in Washington, D.C. right now.
And then, well, speaking of God's work, then there's Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
And everything that goes on where a lot of the product comes from. But then there's Main Street, right? There's all these individual locations that everyone in the audience works at every single day. I want to come back to a question for you, Colleen, which goes back to a point that you made a minute ago, which is you and Bill are having a chat over the kitchen table or wherever you were having that chat. It's like, why don't we just buy the theater? And that would be interesting, wouldn't it, honey, right?
Yes, it was pretty much, if we get out, I need a job.
But why? Go deeper into that. What was it about being in the theater business that was appealing?
Well, I think a lot of us in here, obviously you have to be entrepreneurial to want to even do that. And I think the exciting part of owning a business, you can be flexible, you can make your own hours, you can do whatever you need to do to make it work. We have been working side by side in the exact same, area for over 33 years. So some people, they kind of balk at that, like, really, you work together and you still, and it's, yes, I think our business is a very progressive business. It's a very sexy business. Everybody annotates our business to celebrities, and we had to learn a lot when we first got going, but it's one of those things that it connects us as owners to our communities. So it goes both ways, and I think for us, having been military and moving every 2 years, it allowed us to really get deep dived into that community. We worked with everybody there, so.
Including
Yeah.
the staff, right? I mean, it's the customers, but it's the staff too, right? You know, you're hiring and managing all
Exactly.
these
I mean, our
community
managers
resources.
and everybody in this room, the people we hire are the people who live and shop in their communities. And, you know, we have a location in Sioux City, Iowa, and our manager there, he just always tells us what a celebrity he feels like because everybody in that town knows who Scott is. And I think that's just one of the fun things our industry brings to all of us.
So, follow-up question on that, which leads into what you were kind of alluding to. Right now, you're the chairman of the Independent Theater Owners Coalition.
Yes.
As that chairman, what is kind of the mission statement? What are you hoping to accomplish for those independent theaters that are out here?
Yes, and while I'm chairman, I have a group of 4 over there between Emma and Joe, Randy, and Paul, and we were elected by most of you in this room here, and our mission is to make sure that we advocate and we help you in your day-to-day. What can we do to help your day-to-day operations? And, you know, we talk a lot about windows, we talk about theatrical exclusivity, and those are some of the topics that affect all of us, regardless of screen count. But an interesting figure is there is actually 356 companies, part of NATO, that have between 1 and 5 screens. So even though some of us have larger circuits or whatever, we are there for everybody. And so just wanting to know their issues, what can we do to help advocate for you? And you know, the 5 of us will be here all week. We're here because you voted us to be your voice on the board.
What is the biggest challenge right now facing the independent theater owners? Or some of the biggest challenges? Because I
pretty
think
much the
one
ones
is
I
probably
mentioned.
not the right.
Yeah, it would be the windows and the theatrical exclusivity and holdovers. And, you know, Michael, he is very sincere about advocating for independence. We went to studio visits and, you know, we discussed those problems with each of the studios. There are things that you can't move the needle on immediately, but like Michael said, if we keep going enough, we'll just wear them down. And hopefully they come to our side
Or charm
of what
them.
we're doing.
So, Michael, where did you work before coming to Cinema United? What's your
Immediately
background?
before I came here, or
What's that?
right before I came
No,
here?
no, like,
Oh,
how did you get what
it's a good
airline
question.
did you
How did I get here?
Yeah.
You know, I would love to tell you that I had some master plan, but my only master plan was answering the phone when it rings and keeping an open mind. And so I was in law school, and the last semester of law school, I was ready to be out of law school, and I got an opportunity to move back to Washington and do an internship that gave me the credits I needed to graduate. I'd always been interested in government. I was actually born in Northern Virginia, and so I went back there for the last semester and really enjoyed it. Internshiped in, moved back to Phoenix, was working in a small law firm. They were great to me, and I got a phone call one day, and they said, hey, how would you like to move across country and take a 75% cut in pay and work terrible hours, and there's a chance we're going into the minority in the fall, but it's going to be great. So I moved back to D.C., and it was one of those things where I thought it was going to be like a 5-year thing, and I've been there for 30 years. And I worked there for about 7 or 8 years in the Senate, loved it very much. And then I went to the Justice Department, which is a great, great place to work, or it was at the time. I'm not making a political statement. And, you know, really enjoyed that. And then I got a call one day from the MPAA, and they wanted me to come over and do government affairs. And I really had no interest in it. I interviewed with them a couple of times and said, I really don't know anything about what you do, and I'm doing well at the Justice Department and get to go to court and prosecute people and do those things. And then one weekend I was sitting at home and I just said, you know, maybe the fact that I have no idea what they're doing is the reason I should go. And so I went over there. I spent 10 years there. I'd say I probably stayed 2 years too long. I left there, ended up doing some consulting. Then I worked at 21st Century Fox. And our friends in Disney came in and bought us. And they sold all the parts of the company I liked, namely the studio. So I was given an envelope and told to go, and I went. And then I got a job at the video game industry doing government affairs for that, and that was a great industry. They did really, really well during the pandemic, but it wasn't challenging. I could have done that job from anywhere as long as my phone worked. And so when this opportunity arose, I felt like I was being, returning from exile, because it's challenging. I love this industry more than I love video games, and so, it was
it's
just
never
exciting.
boring, right?
It's never boring.
It's
yeah.
Every week is different. I mean, when
Yeah.
we do our podcast podcast, or we're talking to you, Colleen, or anybody in this room, it's like, it's not widgets, man. These are not widgets. This is a business that renews itself every week. It's like a brand
Joe
new
made a really good
launch.
point in the panel earlier where he was saying this business is like no other. I know when I try to explain it to friends of mine who aren't in the industry, I get the Spock raised eyebrow with the, what are you talking about?
Well, the great thing about this industry is everybody has an opinion. They're frequently not good opinions, but everybody has one. Like if you walk into a room and say, hey, what do you think of the latest Grand Theft Auto? Less excitement. But if you walk in and say, hey, what do you think about this movie or that movie? People love it. And so it's, you know, it's bound into our culture. So you're constantly having interactions around what you do every day.
Related to that, it's interconnected in this sort of very important way with the media, right? This industry is an industry that, I mean, that was the first session here this afternoon, right? It's connected to how it is promoted and how it's talked about in the media. I mean, we do a podcast now, and there's a reason why we do it, right? Is we're trying to sort of get messages out, and that's what a lot of, I think, the theme of the week is how to get the message out.
And also, I think we're all culturally connected to movies. And when you think back to when you were a kid, and it's a question I'm going to jump real quick ahead to, and we'll come back to the other stuff. But what was the formative, and this is for both of you, Colleen, what was the formative movie-going experience you had growing up? Was there a particular movie that spoke to you? Because people generally have some sort of touchstone, a movie they grew up with or their parents loved, and it's like no other. The emotional connection I might have to streaming in 10 years, I don't know what that would look like, but I sure know what it looks like when it has to do with movies. What is that for you, Colleen?
Yeah, I grew up with a family of 9 siblings.
Wait, what?
Yes, so for us, I don't think it was any particular movie. It was going to the drive-in. It was, we could all fit in, go to the drive-in. You know, I remember getting there early so you could play. They always had a playground off to the side, and we would, you know, for some reason, the block would all go together. And it was just a time where, you know, it was a safe place to be. All the kids are off. The parents are talking. I don't think it was really a particular movie. It was more of the experience that was available to you with such a large family to be able to experience that.
And you could take up a whole row.
Exactly. Exactly.
And Michael, for you?
Yeah, I mean, that is a little harder for me. There's one, this is a little bit odd, but I'm going to say it. I have always loved the movie Patton, and it came out when I was 3, so I'm pretty sure I didn't see it in the theater, but I've seen it many times. And there's a scene in that movie where he's kind of been sent away because they don't want him to mess things up, and he's looking out the window, and he's lamenting the fact that this great battle is occurring that he was supposed to be a part of, and he's missing it. And I just think that, how many people do you know in life, they kind of go through their life and they're not sure what it is they're supposed to do. And then maybe they do figure out what they're supposed to do, but they miss that moment in time. Yeah. And for whatever reason, that has always resonated with me in terms of kind of like, you have to be willing to step into these situations. And, he could have easily said, there's a battle going on out there. I'm fine here in this palace, wherever I am. Right. So I think I've always kind of seen that movie as something that it's encouraged me to step into places which maybe at first glance don't necessarily seem logical. Yeah. So I know that's a little obscure, but...
No, I like that. George C. Scott, what a movie.
It was a big epic movie. They don't make movies like that anymore. It was good against evil, rah, rah, America. I mean, it was great.
And remember the opening scene in Patton? It's just George C. Scott walks out on the stage like this with a gigantic
does that
American...
great mug.
Yeah. And the giant flag behind, the American flag behind him. And in a movie theater, it's like, it's just, that's the other thing, right? Let's talk about that. I'm going to go off script for a second. So when you go into a movie theater, it's the architecture, right? That's part of it. But you're actually going somewhere, like you can look at artwork on your computer. You remember in Ferris Bueller where they go into the art museum and because they're right there, the Ferris and, Bueller, but they're in that art museum and the music goes along with it. But I get that feeling every time I go into a movie theater. Because go ahead, Mike.
Well, there's nothing like watching a movie in a theater with a packed auditorium. I think everybody, I've mentioned it before, my first job was 17 years old, the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, 1,562 seats. We had the original Alien that played in there in 1979. And the scene where it pops out of... John Hurt's.
Oh, yeah.
I got to the point I would watch the audience. I wouldn't watch the screen. Sure. And the entire audience would gasp. And, when that scene happened. And it was just, it's magical.
It is
something you don't get at home.
And a horror movie is great. Like, remember the end of Carrie where the hand comes up? I'm not spoiling, it's a really old movie. But yeah, so how does that speak to you, Colleen? Like, in terms of just that feeling you get, going beyond the numbers, the box office and all that. And you were talking, Michael, about the experience, and you were as well. We always talk about the experience of going to the movie. It's experiential, but it's communal as well, and it's immersive, and it's all those things.
Yes, we actually hosted an event a few years ago for the Greatest Beer Run. And we had former Senator Kerry there. We had Chuck Hagel, Bill Murray came for it. And we also had the Offutt Air Force Base Grand or whatever. And they came in, and just having everybody stand for the national anthem in the auditorium, like that was a special place to be. You don't get those events all the time. We did a red tail event for the movie, and we had I think there was 4 or 5 surviving red tails, and they were in attendance. And those are things each one of us can do. I mean, just you have to be involved in your community, and if you see a movie where you can really just make it that experience, just run with it.
In the earlier panels, we're talking about, marketing is one thing, but it's also about creating that experience in your theater. And by having the events where you have the community, where the movie theater is not just a movie theater, it's a town square. It's a place where people get together. I just think that's great. And those movie-going experiences go beyond that. The lobby talk, where people, that feeling when you see a great movie and you want to take other people to see it, and you sit down in the theater. I remember I would do that with my dad and my late father, and we'd sit down, and I wanted him to watch that movie so bad. And I'd look over, he's asleep. I'm like, Dad, it's a great movie.
That's the recliner.
But seriously, I mean, that was the thing. My dad would put us all in the car. We'd go to the Cinerama Dome, Hollywood. We saw 2001: A Space Odyssey there. I know this podcast isn't about me, but when I start talking about movies, Michael, I get really excited about it. And I know you do too, and that's what I like about your background, though, is so interesting because you bring so much to the table on all sides of that.
I mean, I think my background, the common link is I've always been in the persuasion business, whether you're on Capitol Hill or in a courtroom for the Justice Department. I like the challenge of going into a room full of people and having to put on an argument and try to get them. I don't have to persuade them per se to my side, but I need them to understand where I'm coming from. And I do think that's the thing that I think is magical about the movies, is you go in that room and someone has put something on the screen which brings all of these people from disparate backgrounds to the same point. And that's the part I find, that's why I love sports. I love being in a stadium when I saw Michael Jordan play when I was in college, and I will never forget what that feels like. He dunked once, and we were in Phoenix, and the whole place erupted. It wasn't even a home game. Those are magical. Those are like the little moments in life that are special. There's a lot of everyday normal stuff in between those, but those moments are important to hold on to, and so that's why I love going to the movies.
That's amazing. Well, and Colleen, like everyone in this room, all the theater owners, your focus is on your patrons, it's on the experience. I think I can tell that you take that on as a really huge responsibility, because people, when they come to your theaters, are trusting in you to deliver a great experience. Do you think about that all the time, or is it just baked into your DNA, doing this along with your husband, Bill, and at your theaters?
No, I crossed a statement the other day, and it was we have to make sure that we're always in it, but we can do it with a small town heart and hospitality. And that's what makes each one of us in this room special, is that we have that on our fingertips. It's just implementing it. And, our business to me is more of a hospitality and how you treat people obviously it's important if it's on the big screen, but in order to have the people coming back, you have to have that small town heart and hospitality.
Yeah. Those are the parts of the industry that don't fit on a balance sheet. Super important. And when you're talking to an accountant, you're never going to get him to understand the significance of, I have no problem with accountants, don't get me wrong, but you're never going to get them to understand the value of what Colleen's talking about. And that's the thing that we have to start to sell more effectively, because it does matter. Yeah. And so it's hard, but that's where we have to keep going back to.
Back to COVID days, that was a big part of the SVOG grants. It was advocating these experiences and the importance to these communities, to all of our communities, the experiences we're talking about. So I want to get scary and talk about the future now, not so much the past, right? So for both Colleen and Michael, if you could sort of blink your eyes and be 2 years in the future from where we are right now, what would be sort of the best case scenario as to where we are as an industry? And then maybe what would be something less than the best case scenario? What are you worried about?
So if I could do it, I would say a clear 45-day window, 125 to 130 movies released each year, and a separate tier of distribution that would allow more independence to get films.
I mean, he pretty much said what everyone here in the audience wants to hear. I mean, those are the things we have to tackle to make sure they happen.
So the box office would then flow for a longer period of time off of any given individual movie because of the window. So that's how that equates to revenue for everyone in the audience, right?
Right.
And obviously that's important. So the window is a pretty
Well,
important message.
the foundation, but you can have a window. If you don't support it with marketing, it's of no value. I mean, I think we have situations now where things are being put into the theater just to give them the imprimatur of being in the theater, that it'll bounce more on the subsequent platform. At that point, we just kind of become a pass-through. I don't think that's the majority of situations, but I do think you can point to different situations and say, that was just we'll let the theaters market it for us. You put it in there, and then it ends up on, because we know that the movies that are starting theaters do better on subsequent platforms, and so we have to be cognizant of that. I mean, I think that one of the things that is a problem is, the industry writ large, not just exhibition, is struggling, to kind of get back on its feet, and it's hard sometimes to pass up that short-term gain to realize something down the road. That's just human nature, but it's not just the window. You have to have marketing, and you have to have a commitment to the theatrical exhibition experience.
And how do you need to do? Okay, well, that sounds like a good...
Well, I think part of I think there's a lot of focus on I have to be careful how I say this. There's a lot of focus on the people who are doing it the way we don't want them to do it. And I think what we actually need to do is focus on the other end of the spectrum. There are studios that are out there that are fully supportive of, a vibrant window. There's also this group that's kind of in the middle, right? And to me, that's where the action is right now. We have to prevent them from sliding towards the smaller windows, because my fear is once they hit that point, we can't push them back, or it's much harder to push them back. So I think we spend entirely too much time focusing on the people who, for their perspective, have already made a decision, and we need to focus on some of these folks that are in the middle that could perhaps be persuaded to understand the significance of it. So that's just the way, look, you said earlier it's scary to think about the future. I think any day you wake up and have a future, you shouldn't be scared, because the alternative is worse. So we should be embracing the future and just keep moving ahead.
So for both of you, we're here. We haven't seen the first studio presentation. Are there some things you're looking forward to this week?
First, I think I'm just, I'm remaining optimistic. I'm looking forward to the commitment from the studios for the theatrical releases. I'm hoping they maybe roll out some robust marketing plans for those features. And, hopefully Tom Cruise is here to explain one of his stunts again to us. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Look, I mean, from my perspective, I want everybody to walk away from this week not necessarily thinking about any specific presentation or anything, but have energy and excitement about the future. I would really like us to come out of this week having a better understanding, distribution, and exhibition of each other. That might be too lofty a goal for 4 days, but so I think a lot of it is just about the psychology, and can we come out of here feeling good about the direction that we're going? And so that for me is probably, I would love to see Tom Cruise too. That's right.
It feels like the yin and the yang between distribution and exhibition, and I've been on both sides of it, and the distribution side for a long time. While there is a little stress there, it does feel like it's in a better place than it has been in a long time.
Yeah, I think it's an evolving relationship, and hopefully it's moving in the right way. It's never finished, so it's hard to say exactly.
It'll never be finished.
It'll never be finished. Yeah.
And what is, this is kind of a question that I think everybody knows, but I want to ask it, what does CinemaCon contribute to the industry? And where does Cinema United fit into that? What does this week mean for you and your team? And you're right, it's 4 days, but there's a lot to do and a lot to talk about. Right. So,
are you advocating for a longer CinemaCon?
No.
Okay.
No. Well, if you're here.
Yeah, maybe you and I could just come early.
We'll do that. Yeah, but,
so I think, look, CinemaCon's incredibly important. The passion and the energy of this week is great. It's great to see everybody. That interaction is great, and that's a big part of it. I think what we're trying to do with CinemaCon is extend it both before the event and after the event. And so, there's these things that we did. For example, we did a CapEx press release in October. That was geared towards building towards CinemaCon. It may have seemed like a freestanding thing, but we wanted to start to emphasize the reinvestment that was going on in the industry. And that segues into allowing us to do reports on the positive business impact. So in December, we did a report on the things you should look at if you really want to chart the success of this industry and not just box office.
It encourages vendors to build their products and services because they feel like there's a path for investment.
and it tells the world that it's a business that people should have confidence in, because if you're putting that much CapEx investment into it, you're not going to do that with something that you think is going to be gone in a year.
Exactly. So all of these things are kind of building towards this year. We put out a report last week which highlights some of the amazing things that are going on in theaters. Kind of it's the public facing end of all the reinvestment, and then that segues into this week. We have Sean Gamble, who's going to be the Marquee Award winner. Very strong business acumen. People like going to Cinemark. The Wall Street has reacted positively to them, and then we'll carry this out going forward. And so we try not to look at these things as individual events, but it doesn't always seem like it, but there is a plan, there is a strategy, and it'd be great to hit a home run every time we get up to bat, but if we can string together some singles and some doubles, over time we'll start to put some points on the board. I'm just going to beat the hell out of the sports analogies. So that's kind of the thought process. So, we'll leave CinemaCon and we'll say, all right, what are we going to do for the rest of the year, and how does that segue into next year? So it's a constant process.
And the communal experience of the theater we carry into here by being here. We always talk about communal, but we get together for these 4 days, and there's confabs where people get together and do this, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think for a lot of us in this room too, while we all look forward to the studio presentations, it's also a good 4 days where you can meet with your salespeople. It's also a week where we can visit with each other so that we all know, we have the same issues, or you can say, well, how did you handle this? There's a lot of one-on-one that you can do in the 4 days. So it's not necessarily, let's go to CinemaCon because the studios are there. It's a time where there's 350 people in here who you can talk to each other. And if you have struggles or something you did really worked for you, this is your time to share with one another so that the independents can remain strong.
Yeah, it's invaluable.
I have a question. From an independent theater perspective, what kind of genres do you think play well for your group, as opposed to, it may not be the ones that always play well across the country?
Yeah, I think obviously different locations have different needs. We have one on a university campus, so that is more of a cult-like type things. We have other locations that horrors play well, other locations where horrors don't play. So, Boys in the Boat, that was an amazing title, and it stuck around forever. So, those middle-of-the-road movies that, what we need is more marketing for those middle-of-the-road movies, if those are the ones that are available to us.
Colleen, do you find you are getting support from the studios when it comes to marketing?
Not as much as it has been in the past. I think, you could turn on the TV, you could listen to the radio, and there is always something out there. And I think now a lot of the marketing relies on all of us in this room, on your social media channels, through, iTalk, we put out a newsletter. So we're trying to be as helpful as we can, but I do think marketing for some movies have really been lacking.
And on one of the earlier panels, they were talking about social media. And it is really interesting that there was an audience, that younger audience that we thought eventually we'd lose the small screen, but right now it's like booming. They love talking, but the movie theaters become a hub of influence where people are excited to show off that they're there. How does that play into what you do, like on the small scale level or at the local level? And then for you, Michael, what is social media? Is it a blessing, a curse, something in between? How do we look at that? Oh, and I think we have a few minutes left.
The short answer is I have no idea what social media is. I know what I think it is when I can't get my kids' attention and he's 4 feet away. Look, I think there's an opportunity there. We talked about this on a panel earlier today with the international folks. There are more ways to reach people than there ever have been before, and it's harder than ever to reach people. And I don't think as an industry we've kind of figured out the secret sauce as to how that works. I'm not sure that it works the same way for you and I that it does for people that are younger than us. So I think that it is what it is. It's ubiquitous. It's part of the way, there's an entire generation that's grown up, communicating that way, and we have to figure it out. And I think that when you talk to the studios, they will tell you in Canada they haven't quite figured it out. And, they can put out a great movie, have a great marketing campaign, and not reach people. And, it's one thing if the movie's not any good, or the marketing campaign's not any good, but when you do everything right and you don't win, that's tougher. Yeah. So I don't think we know. I mean, maybe, but the one thing I do know is we have to keep trying to figure it out. But I don't have the slightest idea how to do it.
Well, that's a
And it's not top
great answer.
down. It has to be figured out.
I don't think
by
you ever,
everyone,
I don't think
right?
you ever win by talking down.
Yeah, and I do think having paper airplane in the hangar now available to us, it gives us all.
Well done, Mike.
Good job, Mike.
Thank you. I'll pay you afterwards for that. That is.
But it gives all of us access to marketing materials that in the past, when we had single screens, we were always at the bottom of the food chain. So there were sometimes we didn't even get one sheets because they were already all gone. So having access to places like the paper airplane and hangar, it gives us a level playing field. iTech Connect, we've done calls with influencers trying to teach, the older people who have their theaters, how do you get an influencer? Where do you find an influencer? Right. Your employees to do TikTok events. So that is helpful if you have people on your staff. Go to them and see what they can do to help you market. You don't necessarily always have to pay someone to do that you might have somebody right in your organization.
Well, and I think Colleen brings up a really good point, and that is already spent 10, 12, 15 bucks to go to the movies and go to them first. I'm a big believer in that.
And the media.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a battle, not a battle, but it's something where, like you said, Michael, it's not just about the box office, and that sounds funny coming from me because that's what ComScore does, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more nuanced than that, and that's the thing that we have to look at. But
Yeah, as we
getting
wrap
towards the
up,
end
I
of
was
time.
going to say, anything you'd like to close on, Michael?
Yeah, what are you excited about for this week?
About just getting a chance to talk with people, the energy, and it has been a tough quarter, but we want to focus on the future and just keep plowing ahead. And I think that there's a lot of there's nothing on the horizon that we can't overcome. And I think it's important when we have these weeks that's really is kind of the takeaway. There's a lot of people contributing to how we move forward. So that's what I'm excited about, just interacting with people. And I unfortunately don't get a chance to talk with everybody as long as I would like, and I feel bad about that. But I do enjoy the interaction with folks. at
We
these events.
appreciate you being here. And Colleen, what about you?
Yeah, I think, I guess my message to independents is we have to continue to be progressive. We have to be patient and just concentrate on things that you can control. Just remember what's in the large circuit's four walls is the same thing within our four walls, and just learn how to do it really, really well.
Love that. That's a great note to
Yeah.
kind of wrap up on.
Season 2, episode 8
of Ticket to Ride is a wrap.
It'll be available tomorrow, right?
yeah,
That
so
is.
We're gonna post this to
So
all the podcast
download it
networks
wherever you
and
get
YouTube.
your
Records and
podcast. Make sure you leave a comment. Leave it if it's bad. Leave it for Paul. If it's good, leave
Yeah,
it for
that's
me.
right. That's what he always says. And so, Colleen Barstow, Michael O'Leary, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to our wonderful audience. That's a wrap on Ticket to Ride Live.
Thank you.
At CinemaCon.
She's got a ticket to ride, but she don't care.